All right, what's up everyone? This is Don with Third Creative, and this is the walkthrough tutorial video for Textile multi-sport Photoshop template. In this video, I am going to walk you through all of the layers, the processes. I'm going to be super thorough, so it might be a long one, but in the end, hopefully I will have covered anything and everything that you might need to know to get the most out of this design and create the best images possible. Before we jump into it, a few things I want to touch on. This particular design I spent a lot of time on, and I wanted to give you a ton of options, and I wanted to give you specific or sport specific layers to work with. So it's got a lot of versatility, and I think you'll see that looking at the sample images that I created. But I came up with the name Textile basically because you have all of these textures, and we also have these swatches, or they kind of look like tiles, a design element here. And so you can see there's 33 of them that are included, that you can mix and match, and you can put them in any order you want. I've got one here where you can put your own logo. You've got all kinds of options. It doesn't stop there though. We've got 4 atmosphere options, and so we've got a dark sky, we've got a bright daylight sky, we've got an indoor arena, we've got fog or smoke. You can adjust the colors on any of these, and then we have 3 ground surfaces. So we've got kind of a all-purpose outdoor, we've got ice, and we've got indoor hardwood. You also have the ability to use your own photograph, AI image, or stock image. So sometimes it's a nice touch to photograph the field or the gymnasium for the team that you're creating for. So that's, one reason that you might want to do that. Also, if you just want to play around with it and see what you can come up with here, obviously this is a very specific background for golf, this example that I made using AI. Also, this is a stock image from Adobe Stock that I use to demonstrate how you can insert it into one of these tiles here, or these swatches. Also, it's great for single pose images, and you don't have to worry about showing feet. But if you want to add a nice extra touch, or if it's for senior banner or something like that, it looks great with a second image, as you can see here. And then I've got a lot of sample images just trying to demonstrate some of the possibilities the best I could, and we may reference back to some of these as I work through all of the layers, and maybe show you some examples of how some of these things can work. I will say that something that kind of throws some people off is that I've been using TIFF format rather than PSD, or the traditional Photoshop file. Just know that they work exactly the same as Photoshop files. You might run into an issue if your computer does not have Photoshop as the default program to open TIFF files. So if you're if you're in your downloads folder and you just double click on the file, you're used to it just automatically launching Photoshop, or launching in Photoshop. If it doesn't, don't panic. Well, if I can get Photoshop pulled up here, you can just open Photoshop, and you can go to File, Open, and find your file and open it that way. Another thing before we jump into it, if you prefer to save it as a PSD file, you can always come in here, identify all of the sport specific layers that you don't need, and delete them. So whether we're talking about all of these textures, or these atmosphere backgrounds, or the 2 of the 3 ground surface options, you can delete anything you're not going to use. And of course you want to save it under a new file name so that you don't overwrite your master file. But that will reduce the size of the document significantly, and it should allow you to then save it as a PSD or traditional Photoshop file. Okay, so we've covered all of that. Let's jump into this. I like to start at the bottom, and of course I also recommend that you just kind of go through each of these layer folders, turn them off, turn them on, and you can see where everything is at. Just get a little familiar with the template. And so if we turn off the background, you can see we lose quite a bit here. So let's open it up and have a look. So we've got change background color. That's pretty self-explanatory, and I am going to be thorough, so I will even explain for anyone who doesn't know that this little icon here, you can double click on it and it will open up your color picker. And so you can use this slider. You can click anywhere in here. You can go super light, super saturated, super dark and unsaturated, dark and saturated. Anywhere in here you can find the color that's just right. You also can sample from their uniforms or something on here to get a nice starting point. And so that's pretty close to the orange hover uniform if that's what you wanted to do. So a few ways that you can use this just to get a good starting point with your background color. Next we have our floor/ground options. If we open that up, you'll see there are 3 options here, and I have the ground surface, the all-purpose ground surface turned on by default. So if you want the ice surface, you can just simply click this eyeball to turn this layer off and click here to turn this one on. So now we have ice. Same thing with our hardwood. So just pick the one that you want, and you can delete the ones that you are not going to use. Each one has a levels adjustment, and so if you did want to play with the contrast, you could come up here. If you're not already familiar, this right anchor point controls your lights or your brights. We've got the middle one for your midtones, and we've got this left one for darks. And as you can see, if I move this back and forth, it can make it darker, more prominent. You can play around with that if you want. I have the darks here. Down here, you can decrease the darks, and you can decrease the lights. Now you can obviously get carried away with it because that looks terrible, but that's basically how it works. So if you want to fine tune it, you can do that. Also, while we're on the subject, this ground slash all-purpose option, it has a line through it. You may not want that, and so if let's say it's golf, for example, you're not going to have a line. So what you can do is come up to your move tool, and you'll see this border here. You can click anywhere on it to activate it, and then you can use your mouse, just click there or anywhere. You can move it up, down, you can move it left, right, but you can move it down just enough where this line doesn't show, and it should still look fine. You could even bring it up if you wanted to do that. Just basically move it to hide the line if you need to. All right, let's keep it moving here. We've got our next layer folder, which is our side border layers. So if I turn that off, you can see it's these border shapes. So let's look at that real quick. I try to make it easy for you. So I have a subfolder within the folder, and it has a color overlay. So if you want all of these border layers to be the same color, all you have to do is click on this color overlay, click on this little swatch here, get your color picker. We already talked about this, but you can see you can just pick a color and it will blanket apply to everything. However, let's say you want this thin stripe to be a different color, and you want the others to be a different color. So we'll open it up. Actually, before we open it up, we want to turn this color overlay off. Just click on this little eyeball here and it turns it off. So by default, these shape layers are this orange color, but we have them labeled. We have the left thick line. So if I turn that off, you can see we have our left thin, and it kind of goes left to right. We've got our right thin and a right thick. So you can click on the left thick line color overlay, and let's say we want like a dark gray or a light black. Now I'm going to copy this code. You can right click copy, or you can Control or Command C to copy the code. And we're going to close that up, and then I'm going to come down to the opposite one, the right thick line, and do the same thing. And I'm just going to Control V to paste it. That way it's exactly the same. Once I have that set, I can come to the thin line and pick the color that I want. And let's say we want something like that. So same process. I'll Control C to copy it, and I'll come to the other one and Control V, Command or Control V to paste it, and now they're exactly the same. So that is how you can use different colors with these borders if you want to. Pretty simple. Let's close that up. Next, we've got a paper texture. So if I zoom in, it's very subtle. You can see that there's a paper texture that overlaps or overlays. I've got it set to multiply. I've got some levels in here to control the contrast. So if you want it a little bolder, you can drag these darks to the left. If you want it brighter, you can do something like that. But if you get too carried away, you do lose it. So just keep an eye on it. You probably won't need to change that, but depending on what your background colors are, if you want it to stand out a little bit more, you can adjust the levels. And then we have our vignette, which is an exposure adjustment layer. So it's very subtle the way that I have it. You can see that it extends up here. And so if you click on this little icon here, you can double click it and it'll bring up a properties window. Mine is up here, but this top slider, moving it to the left will darken it, moving it to the right will obviously do the opposite. If you don't want it at all, you can turn it off. You can also play with the border and how close it applies. You can expand it so that it barely touches the edges. Probably more than most of you will want or need to do, but I do know that sometimes when I want to really draw you in, I wonder if there is a good example. I think I can show you one where I did this. Yeah, this football one right here, I increased the vignette because I wanted it to really draw you in, and that's just an example of where also this wrestling one did as well. All right, let's get back. Okay, so that is the background layers folder. Next, we have our lower multicolor swatches. So if I turn it off, you can see down here by the athlete's feet, just above the ear. I put this in its own folder. It's just 4 shape layers, and it's really simple. Each one has a color overlay, and so if any of these need to be a different color than what they are by default, you simply click on the color overlay, click on the swatch, get the color that you want, and that's it. Now, I will also say there are some scenarios where the team, there really just wasn't 4 colors that worked with. It might be a 2 color, like a white and a blue uniform, and that's it. And so you may not want all 4. So if you do just want 3, you can turn off or delete the top one or the bottom one. So I'm just gonna delete that. Now I'm gonna select the layer folder, and I have an action that centers things vertically, but you can do Command or Control A, and it's gonna select, or it should select, the entire canvas. Is it not doing it? Oh, I have to hit the check mark. That's the problem. All right, then with your move tool, you can come up here and you can click this little horizontal centers, and it will recenter it for you. If you want it bigger, you can want to, I guess, deselect the canvas, so Control or Command D. There we are again. Gotta hit the check mark. Now we can deselect. So now we can click. I have to hold down shift to maintain proportions, but I can click and drag up to make it bigger or down to make it smaller. And that is how you can switch to just the 3. So we're gonna back up and get our layers back here. Okay. Moving right along. Next we have our background text layer. So let's get all of this on our canvas. If I turn that off, you can see what goes away. We got some text layers up top. We've got this vertical text layer on the side, and we have the lower text for the year. So we open it up. It's pretty simple. We've got a full name option. So I'll turn that off. You see it's there at the top. And let's see. If you double click here, it'll select the entire text layer. Now you'll notice that I've got a thinner or a lower weight, lesser weight, and a thicker weight here. So if you use automation, that could be a little tricky. But if you want to retain it, double click on this icon here to select everything. Then you can just click and drag to highlight just the first name, and you can enter their first name. Then you would click and drag for the last name. You can type over it. You can also do the same thing if you want a different color. Now that doesn't look great. Maybe something like that. Same way that you can have 2 different weights and 2 different colors within one text layer if you want to retain that look. Otherwise, just changing the color, you can come up to your properties. You have the contextual toolbar here that you can change the color. Lots of places, but it's very simple. Here we have our next 4 layers are basically classifications. So we've got our senior, junior, sophomore, freshman. If you use automation, you'll probably rename one of these layers and just have it autofill if you do that. Next we have our vertical subtext, and I'm going to turn this off just so you can see. It's basically the exact same thing. You can double click here and select the portion that you want to change and retain this thick weight, and then you can select the portion that you want to change to retain the lesser or lighter weight, the thinner of the font. It is the same font, which maybe I should mention. It is Ravio. I don't know why it's not showing there, but it's a cool font because it has all of these different weights. Everything from thin to black. So I didn't mean to change that. We'll get out of that. Once you change your text, it may be longer or shorter. You can use your arrow keys, or you can click on an anchor point, move it up, down, position it wherever you want. Pretty simple. Next we have our year, which is down here below the colored swatches. This is the double year. So some activities or sports, they overlap late months of one calendar year and spill into the next. And so if you want that option, you can just double click and change whatever the year is that you need. If you need to, if you want a single year, you can turn that off, turn this one on. And of course, we've already talked about how to change the colors and all of that. So pretty simple, straightforward. Here we go. This is a big one. We've got our subject frame layers. Turn it off, we lose all of that. So there's a lot to unpack here. Let's go to the very bottom. So the diagonal line is what separates. We can maybe even turn off the subject so we can see a little better. We've got this to change the color. Double click on the color overlay, double click on the swatch, pick your color, hit OK. Now you've got it changed. Now you may want it to be different, but typically, and when I made my sample images, this little border that wraps around these swatch tiles, I typically wanted it the same, and so you could copy the code, and obviously I went with pure black for the demonstration, but you can update the color for that as well. Either the same or different, depending on what you want. All right, here we go. The upper left swatches. So if I turn it off, it's these 4 swatch tiles. So a little bit to talk about here. This is where you would want to come in and potentially delete some unused layers. So let's open up the, actually, I see that I already did delete. Let's go back to open. There we go. So this is what it'll look like when you open it up, and it has tennis court turned on by default. So you can turn any layer off right here with this little eyeball in this column, and you can turn on all of the other layers. So once you identify the layer that you want, and these are basically along the lines of playing surfaces. So you can see the tennis court, we've got grass, got water, hardwood, we've got ice, wrestling, dirt. You get the idea. But once you identify the one that you want to use, you can simply click on one, hold down Shift, click on the bottom one, hit the delete key, and get rid of them all. And it will make your file smaller by not having them in there. Now, I will say that you, on some of these, so for example, dirt, you see the line through it. Same thing with hardwood, same thing with grass. If you want dirt, or maybe grass might be a better example. If you want grass without the line, so if it's golf, this is a smart object. You can double click right on this icon and it'll open the smart object in its own window. Here you can see we've got our line. I can turn it off, I can turn it on. Maybe you want to move it, rotate it. Maybe you don't. Maybe you want to change something about it. But more than likely, you're coming in here just to turn it off. Turn it off, go ahead and close out the smart object. Right here, you have to hit save or nothing will change. We'll go ahead and hit save so that you can see it now no longer has the line. So that applies to, it doesn't apply to the tennis court, but it does apply to the grass, the hardwood, the dirt, and I think even, yeah, even this texture here for the wrestling net. So that's an option. All of them have a hue saturation adjustment layer. So what's a good one? Okay, we'll get that out of there. Let's go with water. So water, I'm going to click on the hue saturation, and you could hit colorize, or you could just leave it like it is because it's pretty much all the same color. And use your slider here. And with water, you obviously don't want to have red water, but same thing applies to all of these layers. You can use this slider to get the hue that you want, and then if you want, you can lower or increase the saturation amount just to fine tune it. I have a levels adjustment on all of these, which you can use to adjust the contrast. I barely adjusted the contrast on this one by default, but if you want it to be punchier or a little more less punchy, I guess, you can do that to any of these. What else? We've talked about that. Let's look at the next one, which is our, so you can see we've got swatch 1, swatch 2, swatch 3, swatch 4, so top to bottom. Swatch 2 has a lot of I guess sport balls or other objects that are used. You can see there's a lot in here. We've got our goggles for swim. We've got a cheer palm. You can change the colors the same way on all of these. One thing that I'll touch on is that some of these have transparency and some of them don't. So the tennis ball does not have transparency, but if I turn that off and let's look at, I think, well, definitely this tournament one. And so you can see it's a tournament bracket. By default, I have it as orange and the background is black. Well, this layer is only these tournament bracket lines. If I turn it off, you see we still have black. So you would change the color here on the actual tournament bracket layer. But if you want to change the background color, you would want to come down. These are all clipped to this folder that contains a shape layer. And actually, I'm noticing this one doesn't have a color overlay on it, but I might need to update that. It's okay if you're watching this. This is how you do it. Double click the layer to get your layer style pulled up. All you have to do is put a check right here next to color overlay. Make sure that the blend mode is normal, and now you can see we have white. You can click on the swatch. Let's say we wanted some shade of red. So that's how you can change the color of the background color on any of these tiles if you end up having a texture here that has transparency. And there's a few more. Let's back up and get that how we had it. What was it, tennis ball? There we go. All right, close that up. Next one we have is our third one. So we've got swimming pool tile with glitter. No, there's another boo-boo I need to fix. It's supposed to be glitter, but hopefully you can figure that out. You can change the color on all of these. We've got wood grain, maybe for like baseball bat. Got a basketball net. We've got sand, and so sand could be sand volleyball. It could be golf. It could be track. There's sand and what, long jump. All kinds of things that you could use the sand for. There's a volleyball net. We've got a jersey texture. And let me talk about the jersey texture, because this is kind of a universal catch-all for most things. So if you are struggling to figure out what to use for some of these tiles, you can go with the jersey texture, and you can change the color very easily. The saturation I have up really high, but you could bring it down. You can fine tune it, and it's just like a nice universal option. We'll turn that back off. Let's see, music notes. This is one that has transparency, and so you would change the color down here, which this one does have a color overlay. That's pretty much it there. The last one is where I have a sample school logo. So you'll notice that it's clipped here. You're not going to want to use this, but I do have a logo here for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to pull that up real quick. So let's say we want to use this. So I would have this sample one highlighted, and I will just click and drag and drop. Now, that's huge. I can just scale it down if I want, which is probably what I'll do here. It made it a smart object, so I could also open it up, and if I don't want it to make the file much larger, you can go to image and image size, and it's like 14 inches. Let's just put 3 in there and shrink it down. Close our object, smart object, save it. Now it's not quite so big. So we can click and drag it where you see this blue line in between the sample image, or the sample logo, and the folder, and that automatically will clip it in there. Now you can just turn this one off, or you can delete it, but now we need to move it into place. So I'm going to click on an anchor point here, click inside, drag it over. I'm going to hold down shift, click on a corner, scale it down, and just fine tune it. You can zoom in so you can see a little better, but just get it how you want it. Maybe you want it to run off of the edges a little bit. Maybe you want it to all be in there nice and neat and centered. But once you have it, click the check mark or hit enter, and it's in there. It's that easy. So few other things that I want to touch on, because I found myself running into these scenarios. One is that you'll notice that each swatch tile has specific options clipped to it. If you want to use one of these on a different swatch tile, it's not difficult. Really all you have to do is, let's say we wanted the swimming pool tile, let's say we wanted it up here on swatch 2. So you could just click, drag, let go, turn it on. And you'd have to reposition it how you want it, scale it how you want it, but it can be moved to any other tile. One more thing. So let's say you run into a situation where you don't want all four. Let's say you don't want this school logo. You just want three. Well, now we've got a missing space. It's not too difficult to fix, but I'm gonna demonstrate what you would need to do. So the first thing that we want to do is probably adjust this layer mask that carves out this little niche for it, and you will find that in this subfolder just above the one that we're working in. So if I open that up and we come down to where it says upper frame section, I have this layer mask on here to create this look. We can adjust the layer mask, but we don't want to affect everything else that's in this folder. So you'll notice there's a little chain link right here. If you click on it, it's going to separate the mask or unlock or unlink the mask from all of the layers that are inside this folder. And now with this layer mask selected, we can adjust the layer mask alone without affecting anything else. So we've got our move tool, we've got it unlinked, unlocked, we've got the layer mask selected. I can simply click on this bottom anchor and drag up and let go. We'll hit the check mark or hit enter, so we're halfway there. Now I'm going to close this up. We want to come back down to this swatch outline, and we just select it and we just do the same thing. We click and we drag up, we kind of look at the top. Once we have it how we like it, hit enter, and then that's it. That's all there is to it. So I've really switched things up. I'm going to go back to our original state, and I think we've covered everything as far as these swatches are concerned, hopefully. You can use your own image. You can go down from 4 to 3. You can move the textures from one swatch to the other, all kinds of options. So let's look at the upper subject frame layers. If I turn that off, you see it's these shape layers here. So we open it up, you've got some options here. I'm going to scroll down. Let's find where we're working with. All right, the very bottom one here, we've got our lower frame shapes. If I turn that off, you see what that is. Changing the color is right here, color overlay. We've kind of gone over that already. Pretty simple. There is a drop shadow, and so you can kind of see down here. You can turn that off, or you can double click and play with the values if you want it to be more prominent or less prominent. And then there is a paper texture that is clipped to the lower section here, and you can see if I scroll in, it's pretty subtle, but it's there. And actually you can't see it, but if you click on this little arrow, it also has a levels adjustment, so you can adjust the contrast if you want to. There's also a exposure gradient, and so what I wanted is to avoid using an actual gradient, because some people are pretty familiar with gradients and some people aren't. But I wanted it to be lighter at the top and darker at the bottom. So if I turn it off, you can kind of see it just evens out the color. So if you like that lighter to darker, you can leave that on there. You can also double click on this icon and adjust how dark or light the transition is. We'll hit undo. So you got some options there. Next, we have the upper frame. And so instead of changing the color here, you would want to come up and select the atmosphere option that you want. By default, you have blue sky, which is clipped to this layer folder. So you can turn that off if that's not the one you want. We've got our dark sky, we've got our indoor option, and we've got our fog option. So all of these have a hue saturation, and so it allows you to adjust the color. And so let's see, let's go with this dark cloudy sky, just for example. I don't have anything applying, it's all at zeros, but if I scroll or slide to the right or the left, you can see what it does. I can go less saturated, I can make it more saturated. So you've got options there, and then of course you can click on the levels and you can adjust the contrast. Maybe you want it a little darker, more moody. Mid-tones in the middle, darks on the left, lights on the right. You get the idea. Like cancel. So pick which one you want and delete the others to make your file smaller. I'm going to jump up here. There is a paper texture, which is, it says optional. You can turn it on, and there may be some situations where you like the look of the paper texture on top of the sky or on top of the atmosphere that you choose. But then you also have the option to turn off all of the atmosphere options, have the paper on, and then you can come down here in this subfolder, find the shape layer that is the upper frame, and you can just go with a simple color if you want. So that is another option that I did not demonstrate in my sample images, but maybe that's something you want to do. And before we go back to its original state, if we come up here just above the upper subject frame layers folder, I have this soft spotlight effect, optional and adjustable, clipped. So if I turn it off, if you look at our subject, in fact, let's turn the subject off. If you look right here, you can see it's kind of a spotlight effect. You can turn it off, it's just solid. Now I have this set at 50%. It's basically just a soft round white brush set to soft light blend mode at 50%. If you want more, you can bring it all the way up to 100 or anywhere in between. You can bring it below the 50% that is in there. You can fine tune it how you want it, or you can turn it off if you don't want it. So just more options. Options, options, options. Okay, I think that's it for the subject frame. I knew that would be a long one. So our subject images, not much to touch on here, but basically this is where you're going to drag and drop your subject images, excuse me. You'll scale them, position them. A lot of you use automation, so it'll do that for you. I will say, I'm going to turn off the text layers. I'm going to turn off this bottom. I have I still need to make an independent video on layer mask and gradient mask, but basically what creates this effect where the subject fades is this layer mask, and I use a gradient tool to create the transition. So we call it a gradient mask. There may be a situation where their arms are coming out and low, and this gradient mask would then make their arms fade out, or if something extends and fades out. So you may want to change it. So if you do, it's very easy. Click on the actual layer mask, find your gradient tool in your toolbar, and if you don't have it, you can come up, where is it? Is it in window and find gradients and turn it on? Yeah. But anyways, you can click on your gradient tool, come up to your gradient editor, and just, or selector, I guess you would call it. Pick white to black or black to white, either or. And then you got to figure out how we should do the opposite. So let's do that again. You just click and drag. Now, the new gradient tool is kind of nice because it gives you these little anchors and you can just adjust them. Now you notice it kind of goes at an angle easily. So if you hold down shift, it kind of helps guide it and keep it completely vertical. But you can just adjust it, fine tune it. So if you want it to be more of a quick transition so that it doesn't affect things that extend out on the sides, you could do that. But let's say you just left it and you did have something sticking out. I wonder if I can demonstrate. All right, let's say she's sticking out, but you don't want the fade effect to apply outside of the frame. So with the layer mask, you could actually hold down Option or Alt, click and drag it onto your subject, And I'm going to hold down Shift and click on this layer mask. And so now it's just on this subject only, and you can make a custom mask. And so I can go with my brush tool, make sure I have white to reveal, and I can paint in what I want to show if you run into that. So that's just, I'm touching on this not to make the video crazy long, but I get these messages and emails where people encounter this, and so I figure I'll just try to put it in the video so that I can refer you there. And I know that having a visual definitely helps me when I'm trying to learn something or figure something out. So let's get back to original state. There we go. So that's your subject to image folder. Next we have our foreground middle text. So a little bit in here. I did green for the default option, and I did yellow for another option. So if I turn off these green layers and I turn on the yellow ones, you can kind of see the different setup that we have here. You might use a little bit of yellow and green options. I did that in some of my sample images. If we jump back over, you can see I went with the yellow option on a lot of these here, 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 here. This is a little bit of both, but you get the idea. These are some of the different things that I was able to do with all of these options. And so here you can see where I used all three. Let's jump back over here. So changing the colors, very simple. It's just a standard text layer. It does have a drop shadow, so if it's not standing out enough and you need the drop shadow, you can turn it on, you can adjust it. Same for this other one here. But otherwise, just double click on this T icon, and let's say that we're going with basketball. All right, that's too big. So we can come up to our character panel and we can decrease this value until it fits. Or you could also click on one of these anchor points, hold down Shift, scale it down, click inside the wrap and position it that way. And then you would do the same with this. And again, you know, these are all examples of where I had to rescale, reposition. This is actually all caps, which looks good on a lot of them. Some of them I felt like lowercase look good. I decided to do it on swim here, and golf, cheer I did lowercase. Obviously I did it on tennis, and some of them I felt like uppercase. So that's a personal preference choice that you get to make, but just keep that in mind. Usually I stick with all caps, but on this particular font I thought it looked good lowercase on some. That's pretty much it for that. We have our green option here. So this one, I have it set up a little bit different. It's the same font as this, which still says basketball. It's just lowercase, and it has this bevel emboss and this drop shadow, so it makes it look a little three-dimensional. And then it also has a paper texture clip to it. So you can turn the paper texture off if you don't like that. You can turn the bevel emboss off if you don't like that. And you can even turn the drop shadow off. But basically you would just double click and change the text to say what you want it to, and then you would scale it to fit how you want to. And you can experiment, just see what looks good. If you're doing a double image, sometimes it looks good to keep it all over here on the left side. See, football I ran all the way across. I think it was a soccer one. Well, here we go. So you see how I kept it all on the left. I thought that looked good. All kinds of options and ways to be creative. And then we have our team name option 1, which is this signature font. It has a drop shadow, which you may want, you may not. It might help it stand out a little bit if you're not getting enough contrast. Of course, change the color, all of it the same way. I will say one thing I noticed is that sometimes when you do an uppercase with the first character and then you start typing lowercase, there's a lot of space in between the first character and the next. If you want to decrease that, you can select the first letter, come up to your character panel, and reduce the kerning value right here, this window. So I could just type in -20. It brings it in. Well, that's not a lot, so let's try -50, see what that looks like. Now, this is obviously, I'm being very specific and great attention to detail. I do that. You may be perfectly happy with just leaving it just like it is. And that's it. The last thing that we have here is our lower subject. So if I turn that on, you would drag and drop your subjects here, scale and position them. I hand painted this little contact shadow in real quick, but I also have a ground shadow that I left in here that you could reuse. So I'm going to turn this off. This ground shadow, it's just a soft round black brush. It's set to 20%. You can increase it if you want it darker, the opacity. You can reduce it if you want it lighter. You can also reshape them. So if you click on an anchor point, you could make them not as wide. You can make it taller. If they have a wide stance, 2 feet that are far apart, you may want 2 of these. And so you could just hold down Option or Alt, click and drag up till you see the blue line, let go. Now you have 2. You can move it over and position them under your subject's feet. So I tried to leave that in there to help out and maybe save you a little time if you decide to go this route. And that is it. All right, that's a lot. And we're actually still not done because a couple things on the team horizontal image that I want to go over just in case you run into anything there. So let's jump over that and we'll wrap this up. Looking at the 2x3, actually 3x2 horizontal file. Not a lot to cover here. Just a couple things I want to touch on. Basically, it's within the subject images folder. If I open it up, you know, it depends on the size of the team that you're working with, but I went ahead and put 4 rows in here with gradient masks. More than likely, these are going to need to be adjusted to work with your setup or how you want it. By default, I have a 2-row team in here, and so what I want to show you is if I open this up, I've got some sample row images in here. So I've got my first row, and down here in row 2, I've got my second row. Now, originally this was a larger team, so I left these in here for a larger team, and you can kind of see if I turn them all on, the layout here. So it can work for a larger team using more of these rows, but really it just depends. It depends on how many athletes you need to squeeze in here and how many rows you want to have or you need, how big you're going to scale them. But earlier I demonstrated updating the gradient layer mask, and so that same thing would apply here. If it does, what I have in here doesn't work, you can go in and you can adjust these, and you can use all 4 rows or only 1, 2, 3. You could even duplicate. I'm going to hold down, what is it, Alt or Option, click on row 4, drag down, let go. It actually fell outside of this layer folder, so I'll bring it up until it drops in there. But now I have another row 5 if I need it. So a little bit of work there, and there isn't a one-size-fits-all, unfortunately, just because you might only be putting 4 seniors on this particular document, or you might have, you know, 50 athletes that you need to squeeze in there. It just depends. But I just want to kind of explain that part of this, because again, that's another question I get quite a bit. Everything else is pretty much the same. It's just a different landscape, a different ratio. Everything that I covered really applies to all of the files. And so hopefully I covered everything. This is a really long one. I said it would be. I knew it would be, just because there's so much to talk about, and I always want to be as thorough as I can, you know, understanding that some of you this may all be new to you, and some of you might just jump in, find what you're looking for, and move on because you're an experienced pro. Try to cover it all. But anyways, let's wrap it up. That's all I have on this one, and it's time to jump into the next one. So until then, thanks for watching. We'll see you.